How big of a deal is the US government shutdown? Is Donald Trump a king? And has he really brought peace to the Middle East? We'll look at this and more on today's Trumpet World. Welcome back to Trumpet World. We've had a couple of weeks off. Now we're back, catching up and catching you up. Today, Andrew Miiller updates us on what's been going on in the US, and Mihailo Zekic digs into the Gaza peace deal and anything else that's been going on in the Middle East.
A lot has happened in the Anglo-American region over the last 2 weeks. Before our Feast of Tabernacles break here on Trumpet World, we were discussing the Charlie Kirk assassination and the resulting religious revival here in America. And those are still two big and ongoing stories that we'll cover pretty extensively in our upcoming November-December edition of the Philadelphia Trumpet, which we're preparing here this week. But while we were gone at the feast, two other stories that are still very significant that came up in American news are the government shutdown and the No Kings protest. The government shutdown happened first with Congress still wrangling over the details of Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill. We've discussed that bill at length here on this program and some of the problems it's causing in America by expanding our national debt way too fast. But in the eyes of the Democratic Party, it's not expanding the debt fast enough. It does make certain cuts to both Medicare and Medicaid that the Democrats do not approve of, and so they refused to give the final approval to that bill till those cuts are reversed, and as well as refusing to pass any sort of stopgap funding until the arguments over the bill come to a conclusion, which basically means that the government is being shut down until Congress agrees on a bill to fund it. This shutdown is going to result, most likely, in about 800,000 government employees being temporarily laid off. And Donald Trump is definitely coming out against the shutdown, but trying to put a positive spin on it, saying that he's going to make sure all of these 800 employees laid off are Democrats, and threatening that if the bill doesn't get approved quickly to restart the government, that some of these 800,000 Democrats laid off will be made permanent. And so a lot of chaos and confusion in Congress right now. This will probably be the first government shutdown of this magnitude in about 7 years. And it really cast a big spotlight in two major Bible prophecies about end-time America. One is in the blessings and cursings chapters of the Bible, Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. It specifies that one of the curses that come on a nation that turns away from God is that they others will lend to them and they will not lend to others. So if you know anything about basic math, if others are lending to you and you're not lending to them, you're in debt, which means America's national debt was actually prophesied. And this government shutdown, which is basically resulting from an argument over refusals to basically cut any government programs. Donald Trump tried to cut Medicare and Medicaid so that he could expand military spending and border security. The Democrats don't want to cut anything, and so this impasse in the government shutdown is really just showing how badly addicted Americans are to debt, with our national debt up around $38 trillion now, and rising at a rate of about $2 trillion a year, showing that in not too many years without a severe course reversal, America is heading towards bankruptcy. Basically the point where so much of tax revenue is going towards paying the interest on the national debt that we can't afford anything else. This government shutdown highlights both that problem and the political division in America. The other big story that happened over our feast break, or actually just after the Feast of Tabernacles, but before we get back to our regular Trump Hour recording schedule, is the No Kings protest. These protests may very well turn out to be the largest single-day protest in American history, with a roughly 5 to 7 million people turning up in 2,500 different locations around the United States to protest the actions of the Trump administration. They're called the No Kings protest because they're accusing Donald Trump of acting like a monarch and not following the U.S. Constitution. Both serious charges, which are actually both inaccurate and quite hypocritical, in the fact that the first story I talked about, the government shutdown, shows that President Donald Trump does not have the power to act like a king and circumvent Congress. In fact, a minority party in Congress is really stopped the Trump administration temporarily from doing much of anything by refusing to pass a funding bill. So the checks and balances in America are quite healthy, and the Epoch Times has done some pretty good investigative journalism looking at the groups funding the No Kings protest. It takes a tremendous amount of organization to get 7 million people to do the same, to join a protest on the same day. There's got to be signs made, locations sent out, notifications sent out. This is really a big logistical challenge. And so this is not a spontaneous grassroots protest against the Trump administration, but it's actually organized by groups. The Epoch Times has actually shown that the Communist Party USA and many, many other similar Marxist groups are the primary movers and shakers doing the logistics behind the No Kings protest. So if you watch a video of the No Kings protest, you'll see references made to the Constitution, you'll see references made to the Founding Fathers, you'll see references made to 1776, and the protest against no taxation without representation, all of which are really just hypocritical lies being put forward by actual, literal, card-carrying Communist Party members trying to hobble the Trump administration, actually abolish the Constitution they're pretending to be demonstrating for, and replace it with a socialist system where wealth can be forcibly taken from those who are more successful and redistributed through programs like Medicare and Medicaid to people who didn't earn that money. So definitely huge violations to the inalienable rights our founding fathers talked about, those inalienable rights given to us by our Creator for life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. And so this protest also highlights some big Bible prophecies about civil war coming in America. Whereas many prophecies we've pointed to before in Isaiah 1 verse 7 about cities in end-time America being burned with fire, and Ezekiel 5 verse 12 about pestilence and rioting actually killing a third of the people in the nation. So these are just a huge prophesied civil war, pestilence, disruptions that are going to take millions and millions of lives that the Bible's talking about. And so just looking at the political scene in America now and looking at how these prophecies are going to be fulfilled, well, the bankruptcy of America will contribute heavily to that, but it's also going to take millions of people not just protesting, but violently protesting. And so the fact that we've actually got 5 to 7 million people in the largest single-day demonstration against the Trump administration is just showing just the level of animosity and the level of opposition against the Republican Party in America as politics divide and people take sides. With this new religious revival around Charlie Kirk, making many more people more devoutedly devoted to conservative ideas, and then these socialist movements and the No Kings Party actually using demonstrations and in some cases even violence to oppose that, just shows how easily and how soon some of those sobering prophecies about civil war in the United States could be fulfilled.
Hello, and welcome from a different setup from where I've been normally filming. This is in our Canadian studio now. Still a bit of touch-up needed to get everything up to snuff here, but I will be giving you the details in the Middle East every week from here from now on. Now, as this is the Feast in Review, the big story of the Middle East during this past Feast of Tabernacles was the end, supposedly, of the Israel-Hamas war. Just after the 2-year anniversary of the October 7th terror attack, Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire, to Donald Trump's 20-point ceasefire plan that we covered previously on the Trumpet. And as of the time of recording, they have accomplished phase 1 of the ceasefire deal and are moving on to phase 2. So it's not just a feast and review. We have a lot to catch up with, even just how the ceasefire deal is going on now. What was phase 1? Well, the big news was all the hostages got released. All the Israelis that Hamas was holding, 48, including just under half being still alive, are to be returned. All the living hostages have been returned. There is still a bit of questions as to whether Israel will get all the dead bodies back. Hamas apparently doesn't know where all of them are. But aside from a few minor skirmishes, that aspect of the deal seems to be going forward as planned. Now, in exchange for that, Israel has agreed to release 250 Palestinian prisoners convicted for security crimes and serving life sentences in Israeli jails, as well as 1,700 adults and 22 minors detained in Gaza after Hamas launched the October 7th war. So pretty similar to the other ceasefire deals we've seen, brokered by the United States, brokered by President Trump between Israel and Hamas. Very lopsided. Israel gives up way more people than they're getting back. Israel, they know that this is how you play the game, and they do prepare for this to some extent. So a lot of the people that are going to be released are not for very minor crimes, things like, say, throwing rocks and other projectiles at tanks. But still, within that number, I mean, 250 convicted for life sentences. Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind behind the October 7th attack, he was released in a similar lopsided ceasefire deal. And back then, he was not the evil arch-terrorist that we know him today. So even if some of these people that are being released aren't necessarily that have that big of a rap sheet, that doesn't mean that they're not going to do serious harm to the state of Israel going forward, or that they haven't learned a lot in prison like Sinwar did. He learned how to speak Hebrew in prison and use that knowledge for attacks down the road. But again, while there are still details to sort out, the big thing that has been, as of now, fully done, there's nothing more to do, is all the living hostages have been released. There are no more live hostages that Hamas is holding from the October 7th attack that it has to hold on to. There's a lot of questions as to why they agreed to this in the first place. Since they're not surrendering, they haven't claimed surrender, there are still many aspects of this deal, which we'll get into, that they don't like and they are fighting against. Obviously, Israel's... this follows on the heels of when Israel struck Qatar and attacked a Hamas meeting there. Qatar has been reportedly urging Hamas to accept this deal, and you notice that as soon as somebody pinches at the untouchable Qatar, as soon as their reputation of being above the fray, about nobody can hurt them, that's gone. Now all of a sudden Hamas starts talking when their paymaster, when their protector is being threatened themselves. But now that Hamas has given up all these hostages, they don't have as much or really any leverage left against Israel in negotiations. The hostages were the last thing they were holding. Now that they're gone, they can't threaten to execute all of them if Israel doesn't agree to an immediate peace deal. There has been some speculation that perhaps Hamas was viewing the hostages now more of a liability than of a bargaining chip now, because the whole world was turning against them for hanging on to those last few 20-odd people. But again, just because they've given up these bargaining chips, that doesn't mean they're out of the fight. Far from it. And that goes into one of the next aspects of this peace deal that President Trump helped broker. There is going to be formed, again, according to the deal, a technocratic committee that would govern Gaza in an interim basis before the Palestinian Authority can make the necessary reforms to take over itself. And Israel has reportedly agreed to this, and Egypt, which is, again, borders Gaza, has a lot at stake in the war, is one of the mediators. They claim that a committee has been formed that has been accepted by Hamas and has been reviewed by Israel. Not necessarily accepted, but reviewed and not outright rejected. So, at least from what we can see, looks like this is going to happen. Now, who are these members of the committee? We don't know per se yet, but citing diplomatic sources, anonymous as usual, the Israeli public broadcaster Khan has claimed that half of this new committee that's being formed was appointed by Hamas. The other half was appointed by the Palestinian Authority, but half of them were directly given approval by Hamas because Hamas wanted those particular people in. Ynet News, an English language Israeli source, says about these people, they are, quote, individuals aligned with Hamas principles, though not openly affiliated with the organization, end quote. Now, Hamas, they haven't given up on their designs, on their aims to wipe out the state of Israel. They still see the Zionist regime, so-called, as illegitimate. They still see any resistance, any jihad against Israel to replace it with an Arab Muslim state under Sharia law, under their strict interpretation of Sharia law. That's the only goal they're going to be fighting for, and that is the only end result, you could say, that they will accept. Any deals like this, like the ceasefire deal, is basically just a way to bide some time to fall back and regroup for that end role. They still plan on having a presence in Gaza, and it looks like, if this report is to be believed, they already have proxy groups ready to do that. They already have proxy people that Israel, I'm sure they don't want this, but at this point they've already put their foot in the door for the ceasefire deal. The whole world is pressuring on them to fulfill their part. President Trump is putting pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to fulfill his part. They don't really see an easy way out of this at this point. This is how Ynet continues their summary. Quote, according to the report, the full list of proposed appointees was presented to Hamas for approval with the goal of ensuring the group's tacit support. The move is seen as a way to secure Hamas's continued influence in Gaza even after the war ends, despite international calls for its disarmament and removal from power, end quote. So Hamas, they could say to the international community, fine, you want us gone? We're gone. Except they're not gone. These people may not necessarily be card-carrying party members, but they are, again, Hamas's proxies, if this report is to be believed. And that falls into a second aspect of the ceasefire deal, one of the further steps that still needs to be negotiated on, and that is Hamas does not agree to disarm. They may, again, agree to very convoluted sort of retreats like this that we talked about, like the new committee, but they reject any plans to disarm, for now at least. And even if they were to sign a piece of paper and have all the people in official soldier uniform lay down their weapons, I mean, it's a terror group. There's going to, and more than that, it's also an ideology that, again, you don't have to be a card-carrying member to at least follow it and follow its goals and fight for it. You think back to the October 7th massacre, how many of those Palestinians streaming through the border, they weren't Hamas soldiers. They were average, ordinary Gazan citizens who liked what they saw and wanted a part in it. So there are plenty of loopholes for Hamas to take advantage of here. Again, this is still ongoing. This could fall apart, so this may not necessarily be the future for Gaza just yet. But what is the future? One thing that is confirmed is that part of Trump's peace plan included a new international peacekeeping force to be established and to gradually replace Israel's or the IDF's control over the Gazan territory. And according to the peace plan, even if Hamas backs out of its part, Israel, if it agrees what you did, is still obligated to hand over authority to this peacekeeping force. This peacekeeping force hasn't been fully formed yet. It hasn't been completely announced who will take part in it. President Trump in his outline mentioned Egypt and Jordan by name as coordinators, but Egypt, again, borders Gaza, Jordan borders the West Bank. They're going to be included in this anyway, but he did specify unnamed Arab countries that he hopes to take part. Now, a couple months ago or so, we gave a episode, I believe, on this leaked peace plan, or Trump's idea of what Gaza will look like once everything's said and done, once he's been able to establish his vision. And there were mentions of having projects helped put together by Mohammed bin Salman and Mohammed bin Zayed, the leaders of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. These are two wealthy Gulf states flushed with oil cash. They're very close with the Trump administration. They are very close with Prime Minister Netanyahu of the United Arab Emirates, especially the UAE still has an embassy in Tel Aviv. It hasn't downgraded relations yet. It's the only Arab country where you could still fly to from Tel Aviv that hasn't canceled its airline routes. The UAE especially has a lot of military technology and expertise. And with that track record, it's highly probable President Trump has those two countries in mind to help contribute to this new peacekeeping force. Other reports suggest he even wants to get Turkey and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan involved as well. Prime Minister Netanyahu is reportedly pushing back on that. Turkey and Israel technically still have relations, but Turkey under Erdogan has also been one of Hamas's biggest sponsors for a short period. He even let them be headquartered in Istanbul. Not the kind of person you'd want to rebuild Gaza with, but Trump is pushing, apparently, for this guy to have a stake in everything. But it's not just the Arab world that is hoping to get involved. We also have Europe, according to the peace plan, again, getting involved as well. In that leak that I mentioned that we covered weeks ago, there was a mention of integrating Gaza into a free trade area that would include the European Union. And I mean, Europe is not necessarily the biggest player you expect in the Middle East, but it's not that far away either. It's closer to get from Gaza to Cyprus or Crete than it is to get to the Persian Gulf. And a lot of European countries have already started getting a presence into the Gaza Strip, or into at least the Israeli side of the border, to monitor the ceasefire and to show that they have a stake in this too, including Germany. They even sent a general over to a U.S.-led base to watch how everything plays out. In the United Nations Security Council, even France, there's a sitting member on there, has a veto there. It's saying it's working with Britain and the United States to get a Security Council approved peacekeeping mission, apparently, from what we can tell, separate from the one President Trump is proposing, but still affiliated to, again, maintain the peace in Gaza. So you have Germany getting involved, you have France getting involved. This is really bringing this Trump peace plan, the wider region, together in the Middle East, in Europe, to focus on rebuilding Gaza, to focus on and giving Israel security as far as they claim. This is, again, if fully realized, which according to the current trajectory looks like it may well be, would be a huge game changer in the Middle East. And it would be especially relevant with some of the stuff we've been talking about in Trumpet World, episode after episode, on a particular prophecy in Psalm 83. It discusses an alliance of various Middle Eastern peoples that, as verse 4 says, come together that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. Verses 6 through 8 detail who these people are. It mentions Edom, the Ishmaelites, Moab, the Hagarenes, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher also is joined with them. Anybody that's generally familiar with the Bible will recognize these names as ancient civilizations that coexisted with ancient Israel, but what does that have to do with today? Trumpet editor-in-chief Gerald Fleury, in his book that we plug often on this program, The King of the South, you can request your free copy on our website, says that if you look through the biblical history outside this psalm, if you look through secular history even, and there is not a single instance of this alliance being formed either with these particular peoples, and it's a long list, or for this particular purpose. And because of that, he labels this an end-time prophecy, a prophecy for our day. But it doesn't really make much sense unless you know that all these people have modern descendants, or at least modern successor states. This is what he wrote in a January 2021 print edition article. Quote, "The key to unlocking this prophecy is to know the modern descendants of these people, and God in this end time has supplied this key. Based on biblical and historical research and with God's inspiration, Herbert W. Armstrong gave a good general idea of which nations these peoples correspond to today, equating the Ishmaelites with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, the Hagarenes with Syria, the Philistines with the Palestinians, including those in Gaza, Gebal and Tyre with Lebanon, Moab and Ammon with Jordan, and Edom and Amalek with Turkey." Further down, a couple of quotes, he says, "Notice too that Asher, or Assyria, is on this list. This refers to modern-day Germany." Further down, and other prophecies show that Germany will be the leading nation in a multinational European empire. Now, it's these peoples, almost all of them, like the Philistines, they used to live in Gaza. Gaza was a Philistine city. That's the territory we're talking about. And then you bring in the Gulf states, Jordan, Turkey, Germany, the rest of Europe. It's these countries that are all coming together with this particular peace plan, sponsored and supported by President Donald Trump. And during his first term, this is the event Mr. Fleury was writing in commentary of. In 2020, he brokered a peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, the Abraham Accords. It was considered a huge milestone. And this is what Mr. Fleury in that same article writes about that. Quote, "We all want peace, but sadly, these recent peace pacts have a deadly flaw. Biblical prophecy gives us deep insight into these agreements. It actually foretells that modern Arabs will unite, somewhat like we are now seeing, but they are prophesied not to cooperate with the United States or Israel," end quote. And he was talking about that just with that one big peace deal. It was a big deal, but it was also just between a very narrow scope, you could say. This Gaza peace deal, if it's fully implemented, will involve almost everybody in the Psalm 83 alliance. It's almost like the big excuse to bring everybody together. As I mentioned, this is about blotting out the name of Israel from remembrance. This is something these countries come together not because they want to help give Israel peace, but because they want to attack Israel. And not just the state of Israel today, but as we've covered on this program, as Herbert W. Armstrong covered in his free book, The United States in Britain and Prophecy, also available on our website, this includes the United States. This is not just for the Middle East. This is for America, and this is for the whole world. And President Trump may be the glue that binds this alliance together, incredible as it seems. So even if he thinks that this is bringing peace to the Middle East, this is not bringing peace unless if America turns to God in repentance and looks at these scriptures. This is setting up America for a monstrous betrayal. And you could be sure that we at the Trumpet will keep tabs on everything as this develops, everything as these countries in the Psalm 83 Alliance continue to integrate. So keep watching this region and keep your eyes open for an alliance like the Psalm 83 Alliance to form. If you want to learn more, I'd highly recommend you order King of the South. You could also look at Mr. Fleury's article, Deadly Flaw in Mideast Peace Deals. That's its name. We can put a link to that in the show notes as well.
That's it for today. Thank you so much to both of our contributors. Thank you to our producer, George Haddad, and thank you to you, our listeners. If you want to get in touch, you can email us at trumpetworld@thetrumpet.com. We'd be very happy to hear from you. You can go to our website, thetrumpet.com, where you can get free copies of all the books and booklets that we've talked about on this show. We'd be very happy to send them to you. We'll be back on Friday with our regular Week in Review show. Until then, keep watching your world.